Hello everyone and welcome back to the Ultimate Power Tool Workbench series. In the last episode we got a ton of progress done on this top, and in this episode we're going to finish it off by attaching these side bits, maybe even drill the top, clean up the rest of the cabinet. I don't really know. Let's just go. Okay, so now these side ones are dry, it's time to cut the miters on the short sides. Before I do that, let me quickly explain a clamping issue we have with this table. That issue being that I don't actually have clamps long enough to clamp it end to end. Now, you probably saw in the last episode that I was able to reverse the heads on the parallel jaw clamps that I have, and then I was able to make a few more that could stretch the width of this table, but I don't have enough that will be able to do the length and provide even pressure along the whole thing. And it also didn't really give as much pressure as the other clamps anyway. So we need to find an alternative method to clamp this in place. But first, let's get the miters cut on this so it is just ready to go when it comes to gluing it. As always, I'm going to use a knife to mark the inside part of that miter, and then I'm going to use this disgusting pen that I made on episode 3 of Turning Tuesdays. If you haven't watched that series, essentially I'm just trying to teach myself turning over the next year, probably beyond that as well, but every Tuesday there'll be a new episode where I turn something new, learn a new skill, learn a new project, something along those lines, just anything to improve my skills when it comes to turning. All right, the miters are cut, so they close pretty nicely. That one had a little nick out of it when I was cutting the first one. I don't know, I did a stupid with the blade, but that'll be easily repaired. They're nice and tight otherwise. Going down this end looks pretty good. To clamp this end component on, what I'm considering doing is creating like a hook sort of thing that goes in these bits that will have a block coming out of it like this, and then I'll be able to get one of my parallel jaw clamps on that block while it's hooked in here, and then put pressure on the end. I'll do that on both sides, and then possibly do that reversing thing I did with the clamps over the full length, because I'll have a few spare long ones in order to do that, and it shouldn't need too much pressure. The main thing is I want the miters to close up pretty nicely. And looking at this, actually, there's a bit of a bow in the board which is sort of scooping like this. So if I close the miters, then that is putting pressure in the center anyway. We'll give it a go. So on this scrap piece of timber I've got here that is exactly the same thickness as the skirt, I'm going to use the hole saw that I drilled the holes out the side with as a template. I'm going to need about 4 of these all over this. And then I'll cut these radiuses out on the bandsaw, firstly cutting into the width of that hole saw, which is 75 millimeters. And then once I've got the rough shape from here, I'll take it to the disc sander and sand that radius nice and smooth. All right, and then I need 2 lengths of a wider one, which will sit on the outside of the hook. So one like that, that can square across. Okay, now you'll probably have a better understanding as to what I'm going for here. So I've got a long one, which is going to go on the inside, and then I've got a short one, which is going to go like in this area here. And then this long one will rest on the outside face. And if I sandwich them all together, something like that, we'll glue and screw it. It's going to go in like that, slide up, and then I'll be able to attach blocks and stuff to the outside here. And then I'll have something that I can clamp against when I push the end in here. Genius, if I do say so myself. All right, and while those are drying, I am going to go ahead with the massive task of cleaning up all of these cabinets below, because I haven't properly sanded off all the glue and flushed off the joints after I assembled all the frames together to create the cabinets themselves. Also, I've had a bit of drippage from the top as it's spilt onto the stretchers underneath, so yeah, it needs a bit of a clean up. It's going to be a bit of a task, but I'm going to get it done now while the glue is drying. Okay, so these blocks have been drying for a few hours now. I've driven a few screws in there just to make sure. Let's see. Then this would be easier if it was dominoed in, but it's not. The idea is that it goes, come on there, clamp, hooks in there, onto the end grain. I'm halfway through a dry fit with all of this, and I thought I'd take you on the journey of trying to close up some of these gaps and show you where I'm at so far with things. So I've got both sides dominoed on, top and bottom, which involved flipping the top again. What a fun old job that was. Now I've got a lot of pressure on both the mitre joints using the heavy duty parallel jaw clamps, and I need to do the thing where I invert the clamps in order to put pressure to close up this gap in the center. I'm pretty sure it will, because I can close it with hand pressure pretty easily. So just need a little bit more on there in order to get that closed up. And I've just had a thought, if I use a longer block here, I'll be able to put pressure on the edge of it like I am with this parallel jaw clamp, but I'll also be able to get a long one across here, which will put pressure there. Do the same on this end, and then I've just got to get one in the middle. Yeah, that'll work better. I'm going to use the 1.5 meter clamps resting on top of the workbench because they're obviously the heaviest, and if they're overhanging the edges, then it's so much weight on it. So I'm going to have 3 of those. Those are opened up to full extension. Then I'll take the head off the 1 meter and the 600s, and then simply reverse it round. So you can see they're pushing in a sort of S shape kind of thing. That will hook over the end. Get another one up the other end, probably a 600 there. And then with them both in S shapes like that, you invert the top one and then tighten it up. Oh, nice. That's done it. Sweet, and that's just with one of them. Gonna get another 2 on there as well. There we go. Clamp's not long enough. Reverse the heads, and you have got, I guess it's potentially endless really, but yeah, it's got good pressure on the edge of the Velcro mat. Can't see any gaps there at all. Let's get this first side glued on. Blimey, that was a lot of time lapsing, wasn't it? Right, I'm going to give you a quick tour to show you everything that I've done, and then we'll get moving on to the next stage. So the miters have pulled in lovely and tight on the corners. Very happy with that. And there's hardly any gaps along those top edges, which is awesome. And I've given the top edge a big round over so that when the wires and hoses are dragging over it, then they're not going to get caught on there, which is a nightmare with my other bench. It's all been given a lovely sand. It's all smooth, and I've given it a coat of Osmo over the top. I might do another one later. Word of warning, when you're finishing MDF, HDF, whatever, make sure you finish both sides of it. With this one, I didn't have to because it's held in place by those dovetails within the torsion box. But in any other case, if the MDF isn't held in place by something from underneath or from the sides, then it's going to bow if you only finish one side. So make sure you do both in order to cancel it out. So now, because I'm sick of flipping this thing round to work on the underside, I don't need to do that anymore. This is how it's staying. So it's now time to attach it to the cabinets below. I'm going to attach the top using these thingies. So yeah, that's going to clamp on some of the stretchers within some of the frames. This will go through the side of the torsion box and then they will bolt together. I'm just going to get some washers to spread the load of those heads as well. And yeah, we're going to have 10 of those holding everything in place, and then it'll be really easy to disassemble later on. Okay, I've got the top into position on the first cabinet, so I'm going to clamp it in place and then drill back through those holes that I just drilled, and then that will give me the location on the top, to which I can then attach the cabinet to. Apologies for the lack of talking in this episode. I was drinking a bottle of water, managed to spill it down my front, onto the microphone, which completely wrote it off. So I had to wait a couple of days for a new one to come in because the audio quality in here is awful without this thing. But look at this. The holes on the top have been very accurately drilled out using the path guide system. I have already filmed a video on how to use this, so there'll be a link in the top corner. It's not too difficult, but it's all based on Pythagoras. Corners have been mitered, not quite as good as I'd hoped. There's a few gaps on them, but it still looks pretty good. I've put a really heavy round over on all of the corners so that there's no catches with the hose and cables and things anymore. And of course the top has now been bolted to the leg stand below. And of course the top, as you saw, is finished in a coat of Osmo. I'm only going to stick one on there because it's going to get cut up anyway. So now that pretty much the entire structure of the workbench is here, I'm going to buzz around with Osmo and finish all the remaining cabinets and things just to give it a little bit of extra protection against dust and things. And then after that, we're going to end the episode because in the next one, I'm going to be fitting the drawers, hopefully. So I'll say goodbye now. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Sorry if it was a little bit short, but of course, if you have any suggestions, comments, or whatever, chuck them below. Don't forget to like, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next video.